Okay, so here we are. We're going to be talking about reimagining agriculture, different new profit opportunities that are out there for producers to talk about. This is one of my favorite topics. I gave a short introduction to Great Plains Regeneration in the very beginning. As a nonprofit, we execute our mission in 3 ways. The first is farmer-led education, and I think you all see a good, example of that. Number 2 is we work on watershed regeneration with our partners, Kansas Alliance for Wetlands and Streams. And then number 3 is new market opportunities. And so to me, that's a full spectrum conversation that farmers and ranchers, just like Jimmy, Russell, Todd, and Chris are talking about right now. So we're going to expand a little bit of that. We have a couple companies here represented, and I'm excited to get the conversation started. So, Mr. Rob Harrington, can we start with you? Let's talk a little bit about the foundation of PrairieFood and tell us what you're thinking. Don't do anything. Just start talking.
Just start talking? Oh, that's nice. Automated stuff nowadays. This is crazy. A little bit about PrairieFood, and I think we covered a little bit of it this morning, but I'll cover some of it again. Trish stole all my stories, so I can't tell the same stories over again. But this has been a 12-year journey, actually almost 13 years now for myself, full-time. And it was really started from an accident that was caused by my wife. She made me buy her a horse ranch. And I'm not a real rancher, okay, or a farmer. I grew up in Colby, Kansas. I know about farming. I know about ranching a little bit, but I was a city kid. But my wife was a veterinary technician, and she wanted a horse ranch, so I bought her a horse ranch south of Lawrence. And we had a real nice 160 acres down there with trees on the outside. It was in a land grant. It was a really nice place. And she wanted to build a bunch of paddocks for her horses. She does eventing, which I'm still not sure what it is, but they do it in the Olympics, okay? And it's expensive. And it's a black hole, I found out. You can pour money in and it never comes out. You just keep pouring it in. And it was a windy day, and I'd already had a wreck in NASCAR 7 years previous and broke my back and was life flighted out. And I was actually racing the car. So, were you racing the car? I said, well, yeah, it was with Jamie McMurray and Clint Boyer and Carl Edwards. They were all in my class. I was racing. I could never beat them, but I could keep up with them, was my claim to fame. Anyway, it was a real windy day, and I was cutting down some of these big cedar trees for her paddock, and the wind caught one of these cedar trees, and I was cutting it with a chainsaw, and it spun it around, and it picked me up by the back of the legs and tossed me about 20 feet in the air. And when I came down, I didn't cut off anything important, okay, which is good. And but I ended up in Oklahoma City in surgery, and 2 unsuccessful back surgeries. And you can see how I hobble up here. But the good news is I loved every minute of racing NASCAR and every minute of cutting down the trees, and I'd do it again overnight. But what really happened is as I was laying and recovering, and recovery is I had to hire a new CEO for one of my businesses. That was an internet business. And as I was laying there, I called up all my friends in California and said, send me business plans. What I really do well is economic models. For some reason, I don't know why, I can take a piece of technology and stick it into a business model and figure out where the efficiencies are going to be to make more profit or to make the business perform better. And so what I did is one of my old CTOs had been mentoring a company that won 2nd place in the clean tech competition in California, sponsored by Kleiner Perkins. And their idea was to take this biomass plant in Europe and shrink it from a $200 million plant down to the size of a cargo container drive it down to Texas, pick up all the dead trees from the drought, and turn them into syngas and put it back in the pipeline. And I couldn't stop thinking about the process intensification. The business model sucked. I mean, you can't haul a plant around that's 1,200 degrees Fahrenheit in Texas and not burn down half the state. I mean, it just didn't make sense what they were trying to do. And the paralysis that they were trying to do at those temperatures required oxygen, it required all sorts of things. So as I began thinking about this process intensification, I asked my engineers in California to start looking at processes that might be a wet process, because you don't want to have to dry out all that biomass before you process it. It's expensive to do that. And if we could do it in a wet fashion, then all of a sudden we would be able to convert this from a biomass into a carbon product and make some terrestrial coal. And that's where we had started back in 2009. And we started that company in California. We ran it for about 4 or 5 years and figured out that it wasn't going to cut the mustard. So we changed into a company that decided we were not going to do coal anymore, but we didn't know what we were going to do. And we finally dissolved the company in California. One of the engineers went to work for Tesla. The other went to work for SpaceX. Elon Musk got both of them. They're great engineers. And I brought the company back to Kansas. And at the University of Kansas, I asked my friends there, I'd been fortunate enough to mentor some of the professors and things there, and asked my friends, who knows the most about, changing biomass into chemicals? And all of them said Dr. Subarinium is the man that knows. And so I tried to get an appointment with him, and it took a while to get an appointment, but after a while, got in to see him, and as it turns out, he was funded by some company called ADM that I wasn't familiar with. I knew who they were on the market, but I had no idea that they did all of these other things like make plastics and sugar and all sorts of things. And when I gave my presentation to him, he gave me 15 minutes. And after 5 or 10 minutes, he took over the presentation and gave me his presentation and said, we should collaborate. So he invited Dr. Thomas Binder from ADM down to go through our project with us. And Thomas Binder is the head of research for ADM. And that's when we started. And all of a sudden, instead of burning this stuff, we found out, and through a Kansas extension agent, who happens to be one of my best friends from elementary school, why the hell you want to burn this stuff? You should put it on the field. My goodness, you can feed the microbiome. And that's how we started PrairieFood instead of Prairie Fire. And we changed the name right away, and that was in 2016. And we reincorporated as a Delaware corporation in Kansas, working in Kansas, and that's the official start date of this particular company. But we went on many paths before then until we found our way. And it has just been awesome. Now, the fun part of this is the marketing and the networking side of it. We're talking about vision today, not necessarily about PrairieFood. PrairieFood is pure carbon. It's wonderful. You've heard all the good things about it. That's great. But what's going to happen in the market? What's going to happen with agriculture? What's going to change the linear economy back to a circular economy where the money flows around the producer? And that's what we want to talk about today. And the gentlemen that are with me today here are the ones that I think have a wonderful vision and an idea of on how to do that. And Bernie Hansen with NBO3, which is a company that takes short chain fats essentially, or long chain fats, and turns them into short chain fats inside a cow, because he's feeding the microbiome in the stomach of the cow, just like we feed the microbiome in the soil. And when you can change an omega-6 to omega-3 and have more omega-3 than a hunk of salmon and it tastes like a steak, you got something. And these guys have something. I want you to know this is pretty cool. And then the other part of that, which was talked about a little earlier, that I really think Russell and Jimmy and the other panel are really on, is how do we differentiate our products in rural America and get to the consumer, all the way to the consumer? How can that consumer know that this product came from a farm near Pratt, Kansas, and it was raised and put together in a sustainable, regenerative way? And how can we validate that? And one of the benefits of PrairieFood is the side benefit that we haven't talked too much about, is that once you put PrairieFood down, you begin building SOM. Well, SOM is the same thing as carbon. And when you build carbon in significant quantities, you're going to get paid for it. And that's one of the new revenue opportunities. But at the same time that happens, now we're tracking where that carbon has been made from a farm. And these gentlemen have a way to track it all the way back to you so that your products may be differentiated if you look into this new future. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Bernie first. Is that where we're going, Bernie? And you take it away.
Well, I don't need to say much. That sounds good to me, you know. I just appreciate all of you staying around. And I'll let Bill do most of the talking and stuff on it. But I've been in the meat business for 40 years, and I've watched our market share go to hell. Our prices go down. We're just going through the worst time in history to where the packer's making $1,000 a head, and you can't get enough back out of the calf to pay for to keep the cow. I work all over the country with people that are struggling, but the consumers got no idea about that. And they, matter of fact, there's a whole generation and a half or two generations out there that don't know why in the hell you'd have a dairy, because they get their milk at Walmart. And they don't have any idea that somebody 24/7 is taking care of this. And so I'm listed in there as BetterFed Foods, which should have a trademark on it. And I hadn't met Jimmy, but I just shook his hand there, because BetterFed Foods stands for feeding the ground better, feeding the animal better, and feeding the human better. And so NBO3 stands for naturally better than omega-3. We have the largest algae operation in the United States, thanks to Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, some guys that you're familiar with, and old Hillary, as a gal you probably heard of. They own Sapphire Farm. Sapphire spent $135 million trying to make biofuel. Couldn't make it, but it was going to go broke, and she was running for some office, and they'd already had the solar deal go down. They couldn't stand another whack. And so I happened to be in the right place at the right time. We bought the farm. Today, we're the largest algae grower in the United States. We have patent technology, patent pending technology in other cases where we incorporate the algae into animal feed. And just like Jimmy and the people here today are saying, and what Rob said, it literally changes the animal's life. So you can have a healthier animal, less antibiotics, all the things that the consumer's looking for. And so I'm probably in the last half of my life. I've been dyeing the beard. I got most of the black out of it. And so I figure I ought to do something. I got to get some good marks up there before I can get in. And because I wasn't always this nice a guy, okay? So I figure that tying this together and having better for everybody, because that's what farming's about, we can tell our story and everybody. So I think there's a numerous paydays there for the farmer, but the way it's set up right now, you can't get them. So I'll let Bill take over, because he knows how to do it.
Thanks. I'm Bill ONeil. I'm with WiseUp Food. Before I tell you about WiseUp, I want to see if you remember the story about the scorpion and the frog. Remember that one? You got this scorpion who's on the wrong side of the river. The only way you can get to the right side of the river is hitch a ride with this frog. But the frog's pretty smart and says, hell no, you're going to sting me. And the scorpion assures him that he can't sting him, because if he stings him, I mean, he's going to die and the scorpion's going to die. They're both going to drown. So the frog says, okay, hop on. They get halfway across. Scorpion stings him. And on their way down, the frog looks at him and says, why? And the scorpion says, I'm a scorpion. I sting. That's what I do. It's in my DNA. So I have been in the meat business for the last 30 years. For the last year, I got introduced to Rob and learned a little bit about big ag and whatnot that I really didn't know and still haven't really touched. Listening to you all is really interesting for me to learn. But for me, I know that the four packers in meat, and I think that big ag is that they are the scorpion. And I think that the rancher, the farmer, the producers that I've met in the last year and a half, I think you all are the frog. I know that big ag, and I know that the packers can't do it without you, and you know that too. But that's one of the reasons why we started WiseUp Food a year and a half ago. And that was to try and connect the consumer. And by the way, it's hilarious to me that Rob and Trish, and thank you very much for having us here, that we would be here, because the only thing that Sarah and Will and I really care about is the consumer, because we think it all starts with the consumer. When I met Rob, and he explained to me what PrairieFood is all about, the whole idea was born from dinner to dirt. And for the last whatever, I've always thought about connecting the consumer to the farmer. And Rob told me I had it wrong. You got to go deeper, and that deeper is the dirt. But again, if you noticed, it was dinner to dirt, and that is because, from my perspective, it all starts with the consumer. We started WiseUp Food to connect consumers to information about their fresh food, and our focus is on fresh food. So it's meat, it's produce, it's seafood, it's dairy, and the whole idea is to give them that information, but in doing so, we connect them to you. And once we do that, the consumer is happier than heck. As somebody here earlier said, I mean, they want that information today more than ever. They want to know where it comes from. They want to know when it was made. They want to know how it was made. So we give them that. We combine blockchain technology with scan technology, and can track and, most importantly, verify what's going on and what that product really is. And then we throw some other things in on that, as far as how to cook it, how to prepare it, how to cut it in the event of meat, recipes to use for it, coupons, if there are coupons available for it, nutrition information, or what's really cool if it has something to do with omega-3s and why that's important. Not just that it's there, but why is it important? So that's what WiseUp is all about. That's what we're here for. And in talking with Kevin earlier and talking with some of you, again, if there's a way for us to help you connect to the consumer, you got to do it. And man, I would urge that the first thing you talk about is the consumer, not the last thing. I would really start to focus on that consumer, because that consumer wants to know you. So anyway, the last thing I would say is when I met Rob, I was really intrigued when he talked about soil health. And again, you're talking about a guy, I'm just a meat guy, don't know anything about the soil or anything like that. I was really impressed when he talked about carbon and talked about water and the impact on that. But I was really sold when he talked about the reason he did this, and that was for the land and Mother Nature, and also for the farmer, and that he was convinced that he wanted to do this, and that the benefits needed to stay with the farmer, and that's when I knew he wasn't a scorpion, and that's why we became partners at that point. So thanks.
Thank you, Bill. Okay, so we're going to keep this slide up here even after this talk for a little bit. So, Bill, let me just kind of reiterate what you were talking about. So, WiseUp Food, are you launched right now in the marketplace? And then I'm going to ask a little bit more after that.
Yep. So, yeah, we've been working at it. We've built a information platform for the last year or so to do all the things that I was talking about. And we have recently partnered with a company that is a lot smarter than us when it comes to the tech side of this thing, and especially blockchain and connecting things all the way back so that it's true, that it's verified, all of that. So, but yeah, we have launched. We did a beta test in October with a dairy in Lancaster County, and we've been playing with both some retailers in the St. Pete, Florida area, which is where we're based, as well as some restaurants, which I didn't expect for us to get involved in, but I think there's a hell of an opportunity, and it's a lot of fun. So anyway.
Yeah, so I was just going to reiterate here. Does everybody know what a QR code is? It's kind of commonplace nowadays. Okay, I see a lot of heads shaking, just making sure. Everybody that has a smartphone can use their camera app. And then this is actually a website, but what can happen is that's not static, to where if you're working with a farm or a ranch, wherever that QR code goes to could change periodically, so it can update with the season. So go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, and the exciting thing about it is the surveys that have been done by Big Ag in particular use QR codes to find out more about their food. And so what you have is an iPhone app or an Android app, and you walk into the grocery store and you see something you might be interested in, and you scan the little QR code in the meat department, and it says, oh, that piece of meat was grown in Kentucky, and it was grown in a sustainable fashion, and it happens to have 47 carbon credits associated with it. And if you buy that piece of meat, you know, you're going to get a couple of coupon credits on your loyalty program to this farmer that happens to be Russell Hendrick. So all of a sudden, we have connected the consumer. I say we. Bill has connected the consumer all the way back to the producer. And what we've done is integrated the channel to bypass the big four, so to speak, and put the consumer in front. And the consumer votes with his dollars. And in the future that we're imagining now, there may be different ways to differentiate your products so that you receive a fair value in the chain that you should receive from the work that you do. And this technology is here, and we can do it. And Bill has got it works slick.
Okay, I have to ask a question, because I actually am the consumer, right? So let me ask this question. If you're talking about packaging that has the ability to be dynamic in the sense that you can gain information off of a packaging, I still want that level of truthiness, though. Like, as a mom at the grocery store, like, I still want that skin in the game written on the label. I know what I'm getting. So why would I want to shift my thinking into something that was a little bit less static?
Well, there's only so much room on that label. That space is, and if you, again, I've I come from the meat side of it, and we were always trying to figure out how the hell to get more information on that label. And the thing is, the government controls what goes on that label to a large extent. And now this QR code, as Rob was saying, really, it opens up the opportunity to give a lot more information about that product. I mean, real information that the consumer really wants. And again, there's tons of surveys. And I mean, think about that. This isn't new. I mean, we're talking about it today, but I mean, these surveys have been done by universities and the industry over the last 10 years. So for 10 plus years, we have known that the consumer wants a smaller steak. We've known that. So what do? We make that sucker as big as possible. And we sell it. And it reminds me of the big three automakers back in the 70s or whenever the hell that was. It's like, hey, but got to watch out. They're starting to sell smaller cars. That hell they are. We're going to keep selling them big. And that's, so my point is, we don't listen to the consumer. Again, we really don't as an industry, as the meat industry anyway. And the government tells you exactly what the nutrition and the handling and all that kind of stuff. So there's not enough information in there to give the consumer the information that we really know that they want because they keep telling us for the last 10, 15 years.
Is it accurate to say that we've gotten to this point where we're at now because we do have such a large food system where we're trying to maintain every single parameter of the food system exactly the same? So Bernie, when we talk about what you're doing at BetterFed Foods, being able to measure the different nutrient qualities of the product, so if I hear this discussion properly, if we're able to differentiate the nutritional profile of the meat that's being produced, Bill's company will be able to utilize the packaging and the QR code so that that information travels to the consumer a lot faster. Is that pretty accurate?
That's 100% correct. And let me give you just a little more background. I was in the meat business for 30 years in a town called Alma, Kansas. We still own Alma Cheese, but we built the meat plant, didn't build it, but took it over. I got tired of selling ground beef and losing money on it and making a penny here and there. And so we started cooking meat, making value-added meat, same thing that Russell's doing, and I hope to meet Russell, and all of that stuff, okay? So then we came up, we were in basically the food service business. We're selling to restaurants and institutions. One of them came to us, and they wanted us to make pre-cooked roast in a portion control, and said, that's crazy. How much would you pay for that? And they said they'd pay extra for it. And then it sold so well that they came back and said, we're going to take it to retail. And that's back when Dillon's was still Dillon's and not Kroger. And so we said, no, we're going to do that ourselves. So we took that to the store. We fought like crazy. I mean, the butcher said, you're not selling that crap in my store because I cut meat. The meat manager says, get the hell out of the store. So we go talk to the store manager, and they go, what do you want to do? And so we came out, and I thought I was smart enough that different size families, we needed different size roasts. So we had them anywhere from 1.5 pound pot roast is what we were making. They'd all forgot that Dad's still sitting on his ass at home. Mom's got 2 jobs, you know. She's working. She still takes care of the kids. And she was felt guilty for going to McDonald's and feeding the kids. When they found out they could buy the entree and just add the side dish, it just went like wildfire. But what we had to do to get it through the stores, Dillon's would run it on the ad, and the meat department would leave it in the cooler because they didn't want to sell it. So then they come back and said, how about making that even weight every one the same? And says, yeah, Lee, how much would you pay for that? So we went from pennies per pound to cents per pound, and sold like crazy. That's where Bill and I got together. He put it in thousands of stores. Today, you can buy that virtually anywhere in the United States. It's got ONeil all over it, and they sell it like crazy, okay? So we removed guilt, okay? What Jessica just said is, okay, if you go talk to the mom, housewife, today, they got all kinds of questions. You know, what the hell do you mean is antibiotic free? What is antibiotic free? The law, like Bill said, we can't sell meat with antibiotics in it. You can't sell dairy with antibiotics in it. It's all antibiotic free, okay? And stuff. Then when you tell them antibiotic free means that if that animal gets sick after you've had it on feed for 129 days, you have to give it a shot. You've lost $100 and some bucks, and that animal's they go, what the hell is that all about? Or you cannot give them a shot and they just die. They cannot believe that, see? So that's why, like Jimmy said, and so I worked for years to get this trademark, and it really isn't, it's the story of tying dirt, excuse me, Bill, dinner to dirt. I always get that screwed up. And, yeah, but we're done with that. We got the audience now. But they would pay for that value added. And when ONeil came, now one more thing, the reason this affects you folks is the day after we signed the contract with ONeil, and the big four they weren't near as big as they are now. That was in 2000, okay? And there was still some competition, damn little, okay? So I probably had 6 suppliers. I called every one of them, and I said, and we'd been buying millions of dollars worth of meat from them. And I said, starting next week, we're only going to buy 1 cut of meat, the clod. So what I want to do is I'm going to take my buyer and make him do something else in my company. And I want to buy semi-loads of clods. They got to be here at 6 o'clock in the morning, or we're going to fine you $300 an hour for not having them here. And I want to buy them on last week's average price. Every one of them but one said, "What?" They said, "What the hell? Who do you think you are?" And I said, "Well, I think I'm the guy that takes the pile of clods you got and goes like that." And so Swift was the only one, which today's JBS. They were the only one. The next year, every one of them said, "Could we get your business?" Because when we started using 15 loads of clods a week in Alma, Kansas, and other people started copying that, as you know today, if you follow any of the market, there's times a year where the clod brings more than the sirloin. That has one word: demand.
It's all about the consumer. It's what the consumer wants. And if we have a mechanism, which we do now, thanks to the internet, and thanks to the applications on the iPhone, and thanks to Apple and those folks, we can take our products from the farm to the consumer. And we can do it in a way where we can generate new revenue, and it's just beginning, and that's part of the vision that we're looking at today.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Rob and Bill and Bernie. And, you know, like Rob said, this is the visionary conversation that we're having right now. So my head is kind of blown right now. There was a lot of topics that were brought up. And I definitely think that if we always do what we've always done, we're always going to get what we always got. And so maybe having some of these conversations that are, hard to really have right now, I think it is good for all of us. And so, we do have time for a question if anybody has one. And yeah, go ahead. Oh, go ahead.
This is for Bill. You touched on something with WiseUp Food about the QR code and the information that you can provide goes way beyond what you can fit on a label, in particular a meat label. It's pretty minimal. In the scope of your vision for moving forward and for WiseUp Food, is there any consideration of influencing label laws? And I don't mean from a marketing perspective. I mean from, from dirt, going backwards actually, from dirt to dinner, and what really actually goes into the production of really quality, measurable quality food.
That's a great question. So, yeah, I think that we're involved right now with a company that is working on using a new technology to actually make beef production, or more specifically, feeding beef more sustainable. And as part of that, and again, they brought WiseUp in to try and help tell that story. But in doing that, we're actually working with USDA on trying to create the first sustainable beef PVP, process verified program through USDA. So that's been it's a real, but it's kind of like working with a big packer or whatever. It's the government is always there to help us, right? But it's a real learning lesson for us, and we are actually thrilled to be involved in it, because if we can accomplish that, and we will accomplish it, it really does. It sets new standards and new bars for not just that particular deal, but when you talk about actually tracing things back through and tracking, and being able to verify what really is going on, that something really is organic or something really is grass-fed or whatever. I think that, so I'm really happy that we're involved with the USDA on this. There's a lot of days I'm not, by the way, but I think that it's great for us to be involved in that. Does that answer your?
I have to ask this question. Independent processing meat packing plants are really tied up. They're full, they're packed. You can't hardly get a steer processed. They're scheduled for 12, 18 months. So how do you double or triple or quadruple production in the marketplace from your perspective?
So I'll just give you my 2 cents on it. Again, we're fortunate to be working with a couple companies that are really trying to go regional and to put some regional facilities in. One is here in Nebraska, but there's a couple on the East Coast. So in all of that, I think that's the beauty of what we're talking about in this session, and that is the paradigm has got to change. It has got to be broken, because it makes zero sense anymore to take those cattle from Florida, bring them out here, and feed them, and then process them and ship it back to Florida. And you're seeing more and more people actually start to stand up and say, wait a minute, why don't we just figure out a way to feed them environmentally, sustainably, over there, on the East Coast. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I don't disagree with those comments that the transportation costs adds to carbon issues and adds to a whole lot of other issues the consumer doesn't want us to deal with anymore in today's world. But the underlying issue is who's going to own those processing plants? The Nebraska operation, the farmers are putting their own money on the table to do that plant. So are we going to, as a group of farmers, are we going to finally get to the point that we're going to understand we're going to have to take back agriculture? At the end of the day, that's the bottom line. We have allowed for processors to effectively control 80+% of the beef production. We have left just a few processors control the poultry business.
Yeah.
And we have to take back agriculture. So it's going to be a point, at some point, where we as farmers are going to have to put our dollars, if you will, on the table and take it back. But then you have the next problem in a cooperative marketplace, and that is an untrained, non-knowledgeable board of directors that runs these companies and from time to time screw them up. So how do we deal with these issues? These are issues we have to deal with.
Well, I like that question a lot because it really is almost the template for what PrairieFood is about. We're a distributive process instead of a centralized process. And in my vision, when I look at that market segment, I see a processor residing wherever the feeders are. And I see it in a smaller scale, more automated type of plant where the product is actually shipped direct to the consumer. But that's my long-term vision. Getting from here to there is not easy, but we have to take it back if we're going to control our own destinies, and that's what we should be able to do.
I would agree with that comment wholly. I traveled from Madison, Wisconsin to come to this particular conference, and I have been working on this very topic since 2016 and have met with a lot of major entities across the entire food industry on that particular topic. So it is going to take some participation by agriculture, farmers at the level of getting their dollar and their checkbooks out in order to make this happen on scale. Mm-hmm. We can do a lot. 3-4% of the ag business can convert, probably. But we're talking about needing to move 35-40% of the business. That's what we need to do in order to change the paradigm. The farmer's not going to get a good share of that $1,000 that these guys are making on us until we control 35-50% of the beef business going through our hands directly to consumers. That's what it's going to take in order to get those guys in line and not rip us off.
I agree. Thank you so much for joining us from that far distance. I appreciate it. So I think a great way to think about this is, how do we wrap our minds around all of the conversation? I think that COVID exposed the intricate issues that our food supply has. I don't think we'd be having this conversation right now if it weren't for what we've already experienced. I think we do have an awakened consumer base. Do they always have it right? No, I don't think so. But it does sound like that we are rallying the troops on the ground here to make it happen. So Shelby, yeah.
My question is about your WiseUp Foods. Curiosity. I downloaded your app. It's very exciting to look at. But what's important, in my opinion, is that consumers are directly relatable to the growers, the producers. So when you scan a QR code in a store, that's great, but if you're sitting at home and you're scrolling that app, can you see direct to consumer producers who are marketing on their own and not through a big store?
Yeah, great question. And actually, Kevin raised it earlier today when we were talking over here. And I think that's the one thing I've learned in the last year and a half, and Sarah, you would, I think, agree with this, is that whatever we have planned, it doesn't work. And I say that in jest only, I mean, we plan and God smiles kind of thing. I think that connecting, figuring out a way, first of all, doing it through the brands, the manufacturers and whatnot who are supplying, and I'm talking about the bigger guys who are supplying the retail and the food service channel. I mean, that's where we're at right now. But the question earlier today from Kevin is, would you be willing to work with us at this level if we're dealing directly with that consumer, as Russell talked about earlier today? And the answer is, hell yeah. I mean, we've got to figure out just how to do it. But the beauty of the WiseUp app that Sarah has created is that all of that is, you can modify, you can play with whatever that message is that's important, and those pillars of information that you toggle between, all of that can be modified and adjusted to tell your story. For example, if you're buying a quarter from Kevin or a half from, so how do you cut it? How do you, and it's probably going to a processor and whatnot. But all of that we need to incorporate into our WiseUp app, which, quite frankly, we didn't even think about a year and a half ago when we started down this road. We were just thinking that the consumer wants all this information and nobody wants to give it to them. We'd like to figure out how to do that. But no, again, the paradigm, as somebody said, needs to shift. And the more we can connect you with the consumer, the more leverage you have, and the more power you're going to end up owning. And that's why I think every meeting going forward, let's put this out to a vote. I think it needs to start with the consumer, because you all can control it. You've got the supply, which again, in this, COVID has taught us the supply matters. The supply chain matters, and you own that. I mean, you've got all the power, but they don't want you to have that. And they will make it really hard, and they'll make it really hard for us. And we know that. And Bernie's taught us well on how to push back on that. So anyway, did I answer?
All right, folks. Well, I think with that, I'm going to let Rob bring it home, but I want to make the observation that we're talking about circular economy. We're talking about stacking operations. We're talking about increasing nutrient density. And I think ultimately we're going to get a big dose of all that tomorrow. So come back and join us at 8:30 a.m. for the Soil Health Workshop. And just really quick before Rob brings it home, I'd like to introduce Candy Thomas. She is with NRCS, and she will be back along that back wall. And she is going to be giving a soil health demo. And you're not going to miss it, really, because it might be kind of dusty and loud. But she's going to be giving us a demonstration about soil erosion and some different items. So thank you so much for being here, Candy. And with that, I'm going to let Rob bring it home, and then we will enjoy our networking social for the next hour and a half. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Jessica. And I think the question was well put. How can we tie this together, and what is the common thread? And I've had the opportunity to talk with the Fed recently, and also talk with economists in Europe and in the United States. The common thread, I think, is the soil. And the reason I say that is because of the carbon. And now that we have a world opinion that we need to move carbon from the atmosphere back into the soil, and you own the soil or you work the soil, is a perfect opportunity to bring all these pieces together that we're talking about, from the soil to the consumer. And that is the way to tie it together. And with applications and people like Bernie and Bill working together in this, with people like yourselves that want to change the way this world is to make it a better place, I think there's an opportunity to get it done. And PrairieFood stands behind that mission.
All right.